The disassembly of the Italian Vetterli model 1870/87/15 rifle. Now this one here, like I said, this is going to be a difficult one. This one here is probably the most difficult gun I ever disassembled. It's pretty tricky. It's a pain. I'm going to probably be segmenting because I want to get close up to show you how to do some of this, and this may be more than one part because I'm going to try to keep it to the maximum, the segments to maximum 10 minutes in length. But we'll get it apart, and again, you're going to need screwdrivers, gunsmith screwdrivers, a rubber mallet, or a soft-faced hammer. And again, guys, this book here, Disassembly of Firearms, without it, I would have never figured out how to take this gun apart. It's worth every last dime I paid for it. And I think all the Italians' guns are kind of like this, because in the book it gives this one as an example, but I think the 10mm also comes apart the same way. So we'll get started here and get going. I'm going to move the camera around when I'm doing different ends and stuff. So, okay, first step is removing the bolt. As usual, clear the weapon, make sure there's nothing in it. Now in this gun there's this ring. There's this ring with this knurled notch on the end here. And it rotates around the receiver. It doesn't look like it does much, but if you look, there's a wedge here and a wedge down there. You rotate this knurled thing to where there's a notch in there and it lines up with this wedge. Okay, I guess that's to allow it to come through. And then they tell you on this lower end to kind of tap it up, or push on it. They say take a screwdriver and push on it. You know, there's a little lip in there, but I found that this thing, once it's in there, you got to put the screwdriver, line it up on the wedge, be careful, and you give it a whack. You whack it, and this wedge here comes up. See, this is what locks the bolt in. This wedge comes through that notch on the ring up in here. So once you got this wedge up, you can now remove the bolt. Okay? And like I said, this is kind of a scary thing. There is no locking lugs on this other than back in here. Here's your lugs. Get a good look at them. These two lugs lock this bolt in. And that's what's firing that 6.5 Carcano. And then this here, this sear or whatever, is what rides along this milled groove in here. And it's loose and bounces up and down and does all kinds of weird crap. It's pretty scary. I don't know about, maybe it isn't safe to fire. Okay. So once we get the bolt out, we'll put this aside and I'll do a separate bolt assembly, disassembly video. And now we're going to go back and I'm going to get the cleaning rod and the bands off, and then we can get into the action. Okay, this is probably the simplest part of the whole operation. You remove the cleaning rod from there, and then there's screws in here that spread out the barrel bands. Turn the screws, get the barrel bands loose. So they do move and tighten. Okay, and then on this side you have your spring-loaded stops. You got to get off. You got one. You got the second barrel band there. Press down on that retaining spring. And we got the barrel bands off the barrel. Okay, so now we're going to go into doing the action of the gun. Getting it out of the action and the trigger guard and that all out. Okay, now the instructions from the book, and the next step in doing this, it tells you to loosen the screws, not to remove them, to loosen them. and start from the front, middle to the rear. You're going to need two different heads. This rear one's smaller, and you can see somebody dinged it up. So we're going to loosen the screws. Just back them off a couple turns and get them all loose. And when we do the reassembly, this is real tricky getting this all back together again. Okay, now they're all loose as they say in the instructions. Now, they just show in the diagram. Now it says here to remove the screws, the order is rear, center, and front once they're loose. So we got them loose, and I always see these screws are tore up and I know why. We'll go over that when we reassemble it. You gotta drift it around. So there's a long one there. There's this one here. Oh, I get the other end. That one there. And it's good to have this laid out where you can keep this in order, so that way you don't get them mixed up, because that's a short one. You got a short in the front, a long one, and a real long and thin one in the back. It's your 3 screws. Now with this done, the action should come right away from the gun. Okay, so we got the action free, and that's about it for this. We'll take a look at it and we'll just set it to the side. Now, to remove the trigger guard here, in the book it says to give it, it's in there pretty tight. Give it a little tap to get it loose. Like this on the back. There. Now that comes out, and your trigger mechanism and everything's in here. You shouldn't have to disassemble any of this. I cleaned, when I got this first apart, it was covered in filth. I cleaned it all out, oiled it, so it's ready to go. And then your magazine, your Mannlicher style magazine thing, comes out of the stock. And you can see there where they've patched and repaired this from the old Vetterli magazine. They re-sleeved this or something. These guns are all reworked. And getting the trigger guard back in is going to be tricky, but we'll go over that when we go to reassemble it. So there's your stock. Basically, that's about it. Now that you got all this disassembled, your barreled action, you can clean it. Take a look, like I said there. Maybe now you can see the rings there where that's been soldered in at sleeve. And actually, this gun's in real nice shape. Now you could disassemble this rear end with this pin attached to the rear of the receiver, but you don't really necessarily have to. That's a good look at your thing, your safety, I guess. That's how that is. That there. Tang. A lot of markings on this. Pretty interesting gun. You can see this is probably something left over, these grooves from other things for the other magazine system. It's no longer necessary. Okay, so basically that's your disassembly end of it. Now we're going to go on to reassembling it, which is a joy.